Vampires, creatures of the night, immortal beings who feast on the blood of the living. But where did these legends begin? How did the myth of the vampire evolve from ancient superstition into one of the most popular figures in modern horror? In this video, we'll journey through the dark origins of the vampire myth, from its roots in Eastern European folklore to the chilling tales that have fascinated and terrified people for centuries. Before we dive deeper into these blood-chilling tales, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. In this series, we explore the myths and legends that have shaped our understanding of the supernatural. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single story. Stay with us until the end as we uncover the true origins of the vampire. Vampire legends trace back thousands of years to civilizations that believed in dark spirits and creatures that feasted on the blood of humans. Some of the earliest references come from ancient Mesopotamia and Greece, where the undead were feared as creatures who could rise from the grave to haunt the living. But it was in Eastern Europe, particularly in countries like Romania and Hungary, where the vampire myth as we know it truly took shape. The word vampire comes from the Slavic term vampir, which referred to a blood-sucking ghost or demon. In these early stories, vampires weren't the sophisticated, seductive figures we know today. Instead, they were rotting corpses that returned from the dead, bringing plague and death to their communities. One of the most infamous figures often associated with the vampire legend is Vlad Dracula, also known as Vlad the Impaler. A 15th century prince from Wallachia, Vlad earned his gruesome nickname due to his favorite method of execution, impaling his enemies on stakes and leaving their bodies to rot in the open. While Vlad wasn't a literal vampire, his brutal methods and the fear he inspired in his enemies helped cement the connection between Dracula and the vampire myth. Vlad's reputation as a bloodthirsty ruler spread across Europe, and over the centuries his name became synonymous with the vampire legend. This transformation reached its peak with Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, where the character of Count Dracula was born, an immortal, blood-sucking aristocrat with a thirst for power and human blood. Now our Today Trivia's question. Vlad the Impaler inspired Bram Stoker's Count Dracula, but did you know Vlad had a notorious title given by his own people? What was it? Stay with us until later in the video to discover the answer. Across Eastern Europe, belief in vampires ran deep. Villagers believed that the dead could rise from their graves to feed on the living, especially during times of plague or famine. In many cases, when an unexplained illness or death struck a community, it was blamed on a vampire. Villagers would often dig up the bodies of suspected vampires, looking for signs such as fresh blood around the mouth or unusually preserved corpses. In some areas, these vampires were staked through the heart, decapitated, or even burned to ensure they wouldn't return from the dead. The fear of the undead was so real that it wasn't uncommon for bodies to be buried with garlic or iron stakes as protection against vampiric resurrection. It wasn't until the 18th century that vampire legends began to take on a more romanticized form. In Western Europe, writers and poets were captivated by the idea of the seductive, immortal creature that preyed on the innocent. One of the first literary vampires appeared in The Vampire, a short story written by John Polidori in 1819. Polidori's vampire was aristocratic and charming, laying the groundwork for the more elegant vampire that would later become iconic. But it was Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897 that truly defined the modern image of the vampire. Count Dracula, with his castle in Transylvania, his mysterious powers, and his thirst for blood, set the standard for vampire stories in literature, film, and television. Dracula's blend of horror, sexuality, and Gothic romance captured the imagination of readers worldwide, and his influence can still be seen in vampire tales today. And now, for the answer to our trivia question. Vlad the Impaler was known by his people as Vlad Tepes, which translates to Vlad the Impaler. His cruelty was infamous, but it was his reputation for impaling enemies that earned him this fearsome title, making him one of the most feared rulers in medieval Europe. Fast forward to today, and vampires are still an enduring part of popular culture. From the terrifying portrayal of Nosferatu in the silent film era to the romanticized vampires of Twilight, the vampire has taken on many forms. Whether as fearsome monsters or tragic heroes, vampires continue to fascinate audiences around the world. Television shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, movies like Interview with the Vampire, and books like The Vampire Chronicles have expanded on the vampire mythos, exploring the psychological and emotional aspects of these immortal beings. But despite the different portrayals, the core of the vampire legend remains the same: an eternal being who survives by feeding on the living. The vampire myth has evolved over centuries, from ancient superstitions about the dead rising from their graves to the sophisticated and seductive creatures of modern horror. But at its core, the vampire legend taps into one of humanity's deepest fears, the fear of death and what lies beyond it. Vampires, as immortal beings who defy death, continue to captivate us with their mix of horror and allure. And while the vampire may change with the times, the fascination with these creatures of the night shows no signs of fading. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the origins of vampires. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. What vampire myth do you find the most intriguing? And remember, always question and seek deeper understanding.